record. Yeah, so welcome. My name is Janelle Piotr, and I am the Climate Smart Coordinator for the Town and Village of New Paltz. And we have these monthly meetups that we call Climate Solution Meetup, and very much focused on solutions. And one of the things that we also have every month is our Climate Smart Book Club. And this month we're reading a book called Dark Money. And so that should be very interesting. And that's always the third Tuesday of the month. And we have a Climate Smart Task Force in New Paltz, and we're always looking for new members. So if you have an interest in that, be sure to let me know. And if there's, I think everybody on this current meetup is already on my mailing list for the newsletter. But as you know, people that would like to be added to our newsletter list, be sure to let us know. So tonight we have with us two presenters, and they are from the NRDC, or Natural Resources Defense Council. And our first presenter is Dan Rescheduled, and he is the acting director of the Natural Resources Defense Council's Pollinator Initiative, which focuses on protecting our nation's bee populations from the ever-growing threats to their health and existence, in particular, the use of bee toxic pesticides. Rochelle was formerly co-director of NRDC's Community Fracking Defense Project and an advocate for the cleanup of industrial pollution in the New York region. We also have Lena Fostel, and she is a contract organizer with the NRDC, focusing on outreach surrounding the Birds and the Bees Protection Act, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. Fostel was formerly a program coordinator of the Squash Hunger Program at the Healthy Food Access nonprofit Capital Roots, working to coordinate the redistribution of donated and purchased local food to food assistance programs across the Capital Region and Mohawk Valley. So with that, I'll let our presenters get started, and we will be definitely having an opportunity at the end of the presentation for questions and further discussion. So welcome, Dan and Lena. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Janelle, for having us. And I think I might have to have you let me share my screen. Hopefully,
yes,
hopefully we won't invite all sorts of chaos with that.
Yes, you're all set now.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Right, so as Janelle mentioned, I'm acting director of NRDC's Pollinator Initiative. I'm here today with Lena, who is organizing around this issue with our Action Fund. And we're here today to talk a little bit about neonicotinoids, or Neonics for short, why they're so bad for bees, birds, health, and the climate, and what, importantly, what we all can do about it in New York. So starting with our entry into this issue, we first became interested in neonics because of the humble honeybee. And as folks probably know in this group, bees and other pollinators are hugely important. To start, 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we take comes from pollination provided by bees and other pollinators. And to give you a sense of what that looks like, here's your grocery store in today's world. And here's what that grocery store looks like in a world without pollinators. So we would certainly still have food. We would just have a lot less of it. We would lose a lot of our most delicious and nutritious options, and all of the food would be a lot more expensive. Beyond the grocery store aisle, we also know that bees and other pollinators are absolutely essential to ecosystems. So about 80% of the plant life on the face of the earth requires bees and other pollinators to reproduce. So if we lose pollinators, we worry not only about food security, but also the collapse of entire ecosystems, which obviously has climate implications as well. And that's sort of what we're worried about. In the mid-2000s, we saw honeybee populations just start to take a nosedive, right? Up until that point, beekeepers were losing 15, 20% of their colonies a year, and those numbers jumped to 30, 40, 50% virtually overnight. and happening year round, summer as well as winter. And actually they didn't, as you can see back in 2008, they didn't even use to count summer losses. So those numbers have persisted to this day and are sort of the new and scary normal that we find ourselves faced with. But, you know, honeybees are livestock. They are replenished every year. So there's a whole industry that breeds and replaces colonies. And even though they've had to work overtime over the last 15 years or so, they managed to keep the level of honeybee colonies stable.
Jesus Christ!
Ooh. The same is not true for our native pollinators. So, you know, this is the result of a survey that New York State just completed, the New York State Natural Heritage Program, finding that about 40 to 60% of the state's native pollinators, which includes 400 plus species of bees alone, are at risk of local extinction. So, right, not the same industry breeding and replacing those species. And that's, again, not just a concern for ecosystems, but also a concern for food production as well. This is a study just a couple of years ago, finding that apples, blueberries, and cherries, all important crops in New York, are limited by a lack of bees and other pollinators, particularly the loss or a lack of wild bees. So if we had more pollinators, we would be producing more food today. So, you know, there are a lot of things that are affecting bees and other pollinators. There is habitat loss, there is climate change itself, there are parasites, pathogens. Why are we so concerned about just one class of pesticides? And I think it's helpful to know what neonics are first. They are neurotoxic insecticides, which means they are pesticides designed to kill bugs by attacking their nerves. And the way they work is they attach to nerves in an insect's body, and they stimulate that nerve until it eventually fails. So if you've seen a bee that has been acutely poisoned with neonics, that bee will oftentimes start to shake uncontrollably before becoming paralyzed and dying. But, you know, look, there are a lot of pesticides out there. They all kill insects in gruesome ways. Why do we care so much about neonics? And there are three big reasons. So the first is that neonics are super duper toxic to insects. And to give you a sense of scale here, just one neonic treated corn seed can have enough active ingredient to kill 250,000 bees or more. And neonics have made US agriculture 48 times more toxic to insect life since their introduction. And unsurprisingly, and this is where we really see the connection, that jump in harmfulness and toxicity really begins almost exactly at the same time that we start to see mass unexplained losses of these honeybee colonies. And while these other factors are all important, there was not a sudden spike in 2006, 2007 that you see with these other causes. There is a sudden uptick in the use of neonics, especially on as seed treatments on corn and soybean seeds. And I'll explain what that is in a second. So second big problem with neonics is that they are just so good at contaminating whole ecosystems. So they are designed, unlike, you know, conventional insecticides, which you spray on a plant, they kill the bug and they dissipate. Neonics are designed to get into the plant itself, to get into the leaves, the roots, the fruit, the pollen, everything, and to make the plant itself toxic to insects, to make the plant itself pesticidal. And that means that they can be applied in all sorts of interesting ways. Of course, they can be sprayed, and they are, but they can also be applied directly to the soil and most commonly applied directly to crop seeds. And so here's a picture of some neonic treated corn seed. And here's a close-up if you didn't catch a good glimpse of the other one. They don't always pick the same color. And the idea is that as that plant is growing from a seed, it literally soaks up the pesticidal coating from its roots and becomes toxic itself. The problem is only about 2 to 5% of that coating makes it into the target plant. The other 94, 95+% stays in the environment. Some is released as in these toxic dust clouds during planting, but most of it stays in the soil. And it stays there for years. And those same properties that let the pesticides get up into the plant, namely their water solubility, means that anytime it rains, anytime there is irrigation, lawn watering, those neonics are going to move through the soil. They're going to contaminate new soil. If there are plants in that new soil, those plants soak up the pesticides, they become toxic. If there's a water supply nearby, that water supply becomes contaminated. And the third problem with neonics is that they are just all over the place. So they are the most popular insecticides in the US. About 1 million acres of virtually all corn acres, conventional corn acres, are pre-treated with a neonic. So in New York, that's about 1 million acres. In New York, there's probably also several 100,000 acres of neonic treated soybean. But off the farm, neonics are also all over lawns, gardens, golf courses, you name it. These pesticides are all over the place. And we've seen their use in New York go up and up and up. And I'll bring folks' attention to that red square there in the last bar. That's the use of imidacloprid, just one of 5 EPA-approved neonics used in New York. And this is a map of imidacloprid use over the years. And I know 2014 is not super duper recent, but it's the last year that we have data for the treated seeds, which are the biggest use. So it's the last year that we have good data. And as you can see, there's a pretty good amount of New York that's covered. But again, this is not even the most used neonic chemical in New York, right? And this is just agricultural use. So all those urban areas that we see in Westchester, Long Island, and around other cities, those would be filled in if this map also captured the non-ag uses, and certainly a lot more areas filled in if we capture the other neonics. But what this gives you a sense of is how prevalent these pesticides are, and that we have whole landscapes where they are virtually ubiquitous in the environment. And what happens is, because they persist in the soil for multiple years, and they're used in the same places year after year after year after year, what you have is a buildup of toxicity in the soil that is constantly expanding and contaminating new soil, plants, water, every time it rains. So, we see that pretty commonly in New York water. We see neonics all over surface waters. This is sort of the proof in the pudding. They're the most common insecticides in the Long Island aquifer. And it's important to note that most of the tests are just looking for imidacloprid. So again, not even the most used neonic in New York. Just about all of the detections of imidacloprid are above EPA benchmark levels for harm to aquatic ecosystems. And it's worth noting that conventional chlorination treatment does not remove neonics from source water. Only advanced filtration does, and that's used on very few water systems. So, we have this ubiquitous contamination that's building up over time. What's the impact of that? Well, the earliest impact, our sort of canary in the coal mine, were with the harms to the honeybees. And we know that it's absolutely confirmed in hundreds, if not thousands, of studies that neonics are driving pollinator losses. And that includes, again, not just the honeybees, but also the wild bee species. But beyond that, neonics are hollowing out ecosystems broadly. So the anecdote that I tell people is, if you can remember in the 1990s, driving through a rural area in the middle of summer, you'd have to turn on your windshield wipers, whether it was raining or not, just to get all the bugs off your windshield. Think about when the last time was that you had to do that. And I've had folks tell me at these presentations, they've driven across the whole state, some of them the whole country, and had maybe one bug on the windshield. So that's sort of where it hits home, I think, for most people, because for the most part, this is something that's happening in front of our eyes, but we're not seeing it. And I think that's one place where you notice it, or at least notice the absence. And where this crosses over with climate is regenerative agriculture. So, well, certainly pollinators are important for regenerative agriculture, but we all know that if we're going to solve the climate crisis, we have to move on beyond our modern industrial agricultural practices to practices that are more in line with nature and store carbon. And neonics interfere with that in a number of ways. The first is that neonics are apparently better at killing pest predators, so the good bugs that eat the bad bugs, than they are at killing the bad bugs. And actually what makes a pest is that it's good at reproducing, right, very quickly. The predators less so. And as they eat these pests that are contaminated with neonics, we now see studies showing that those contaminants are passing to the predators and killing the predators and harming those populations, thereby defeating sort of the natural mechanisms for pest control. And in some ways, maybe insidiously, causing maybe a greater pest problem and more demand for pesticides. Another important crossover with climate is on insects that improve soil health directly. So these are the insects that decompose the plant matter and restore nutrients to the soil. And we're seeing more and more research on that and sort of the neonic interference with those communities as well. And that's alarming and concerning. And then this is something that's relatively new. I think we're going to see more of this, but it's sort of nascent research. I almost didn't include it, but there is some research showing that neonics interfere with soil microbial communities themselves. So the very smallest elements of life in the soil that are key to soil health, including nitrogen cycling and carbon sequestration. And I think we're going to see more and more on that. Again, that's pretty nascent, but we have, because neonics are so ubiquitous in agricultural environments, there's no way that they're not having an impact on soil microbial life. So, moving off of the farm, what's happening more broadly in the ecosystem? Well, first, we know that neonics are definitely driving bird losses as well. And, the first way they do this is indirectly by driving down insect populations. And I think some of you may have heard of the study, I think it came out a year or two ago, finding that we've lost about 30% of our birds in North America over the last 50 years. Well, another group of folks came in after that study, and they looked at which birds we were losing. And they looked at the species of birds for which insects weren't essential and found that there was actually a slight population gain for most of those birds. But then they looked at the birds for which insects were an essential component of the diet. And those are the birds that we're losing, right? So it's actually pretty striking, the difference, but we see that the loss of insects is actually driving the loss of birds, and that's unsurprising. If birds need to eat insects and there's less food, there's less birds. Same thing happens with fish populations, as it turns out. This is a study from Japan looking at zooplankton. And for those that are unfamiliar with zooplankton, these are zooplankton. They're essentially, water bugs. And what they found is in the early 90s, when the neonics were first being introduced in Japan, one of the earliest places they saw that they were studying this lake, and they found, which was also a sustainable fishery, and they found that in the early 90s, those populations of zooplankton just hit a wall. And at the same time, unsurprisingly, catches of the fish that ate those zooplankton also hit a wall. And so they were very confused as to what happened so suddenly in this ecosystem and to these fishermen, and later linked it to the introduction of neonics in nearby agriculture. And, this is a very unique study, and because we can't really, for the most part, it's hard to get a controlled study where we have a before and after the introduction of neonics. They're just such a part of our environment now. So this is a really important study showing just how impactful these pesticides are on aquatic ecosystems. So, beyond these indirect impacts, neonics also directly impact birds. So just One neonic treated corn seed has enough active ingredient to kill a small songbird if that bird eats the seed. And we know that birds do eat these seeds during planting. They pick them right off the ground and consume them. But even at levels that don't kill birds outright, they have neurological impacts on the birds. They interfere with migration. They interfere with their ability to navigate, with their ability to reproduce, with their immune systems. This is from a study finding that white-crowned sparrows, when they ate neonic treated seeds, would start to lose weight almost immediately during a time of migration, which, as you know, is not a time you want to lose a lot of weight as a bird. So, even where neonics aren't killing birds directly and outright, they are weakening their survival systems and causing either the death of that bird eventually or the death of the population that can't reproduce. Where things start to get scary is with large mammals like white-tailed deer. So this study came about from some reports of hunters in the upper Midwest seeing weird things going on with the deer they caught, strange things going on with their organs, deformed jaws. There was a concern that maybe it was related to the use of these new pesticides, neonics. And lo and behold, they did a controlled study and found that neonic exposure in the womb was associated with all sorts of birth defects, including deformed jaw, decreased organ weights, and increased death of fawns. So, the refrain from industry was, well, you did this study and you pumped deer with a bunch of pesticides. Obviously, you're going to find some impact there, but deer in the wild are really not exposed to these levels of pesticides. You sort of, you use a lot of pesticides to juice up your results. So the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, after this study, decided to do a survey and find in the wild, are neonics really getting into deer? And the 2019 data was pretty alarming. They found that about 61% of deer, and this is 800 deer all over the state, had neonics in their bodies, with 29% above levels associated with birth defects and death in the study. So that's pretty scary. The 2021 numbers are even scarier. So just 2 years later, they found neonics in 94% of deer, and this is deer all over the state, urban areas, rural areas, it didn't matter, in areas where there was a lot of neonic use, where there wasn't, and 64% had levels associated with birth defects and death. So we see a huge jump in the environment. This actually surprised even me, and these results just came out very recently. So, again, I said deer are large mammals, we're large mammals. And perhaps unsurprisingly, we see studies, even though we're sort of the early stages of the human health research, because these are relatively new pesticides, we do see studies linking neonic exposure to birth defects of the heart and brain, autism-like symptoms, and for people that are exposed in the womb. And then for folks exposed later in life, all sorts of reproductive impacts, sperm quality, quantity, decreased testosterone. And these are all effects that are consistent with animal studies, showing impacts to the developing nervous system. Now, the reason this is all scary is because, like the deer, we are widely exposed. So based on 2016 data, the CDC found that about half the American population has neonics in their body on any given day. So we're all pretty widely exposed. But a more recent study, and again, this tracks the deer study, of pregnant women, 171 pregnant women from New York and 4 other states, found that 94% had neonics in their bodies. And this is data from 2017 and 2020. And what's interesting about this, or scary, is that those rates increased every year over the 4-year study, both in terms of frequency and the amount of neonics in people's bodies. So this is an issue that definitely hits close to home and doesn't appear to be getting better. It appears to be getting worse. So, and this is just a piece from Dr. Phil Landgren. He's sort of a lead health expert, wrote an op-ed in support of a bill limiting neonics in New York, which we'll talk about in a second. And I just thought it was good to include some of these quotes because he likens neonics to other neurotoxins like lead and mercury, and just talks about how, one of the biggest concerns for the exposure here is the damage that these pesticides do to childhood neural development, just because how delicate children's brains are during that stage of development, and the fact that these affect neurons in our brain. As it turns out, the architecture of insect neurons and our neurons are not so different. And even though the neurons targeted in insect bodies are more distributed through insects, we have these in very sensitive areas, these receptors that the pesticides target in very sensitive areas of our brain and central nervous system. So, okay, so that's the full scope of the problem. What have others done about it? The EU largely banned neonics in 2018. They basically banned all outdoor uses. They had actually banned the corn and soybean seed use in 2013. So they've been banned there for nearly a decade. And France banned a couple other neonic chemicals as well. Quebec and Ontario, just across the border, have largely phased out of using neonic-treated corn and soybean seeds. The US EPA hasn't done a whole lot. They do have some decisions coming out this year, but we're not expecting much. As with a lot of pesticides, US EPA is sort of the laggard when it comes to Europe or even other states. And again, there's the last decision from EPA came out under the previous administration. It was not very good, although it did have some protections for human health, which were surprising actually. But yeah, we're not expecting a huge change in EPA's course, but we'll see in the spring. And that has largely left it to the states. So New Jersey and Maine recently banned non-agricultural uses of neonics outdoors, which is most of the neonic use in those states. And a number of other states, including now New York, I should add New York, have made neonics restricted use, which means only certified applicators can use them. But unfortunately, that doesn't affect the neonic treated seeds, which are the largest and most widespread use. And it doesn't affect, anybody with a license, so landscapers, et cetera, are still able to use the pesticide, and that's still a huge use. So to address the bulk of neonic use in New York, the Birds and Bees Protection Act has been in the New York legislature for a number of years. It was introduced by Assemblyman Engelbright and Senator Hoylman. Assemblyman Engelbright lost his seat in the last election, but Senator Hoylman is still there. And this bill was based on a report from Cornell University that looked at over 1,100 peer-reviewed studies, and importantly, comparing neonics to their likely alternative. Because the thing with pesticides is they can be bad, you can get rid of them, but the question is, what are people going to replace them with? And is that worse? And what they found is two key things. The first is that the neonic-treated corn, soybean, and wheat seeds, despite posing big problems to bees and being the largest and most widespread use, don't provide any economic benefits to farmers. They provide no overall net income benefits to farmers. So that makes them sort of the biggest and least justifiable use. The other key finding is the turf and ornamental uses, so the lawn and garden uses, pose some of the highest risk to pollinators, and we know to the environment as well. They're used in much higher rates per acre than the ag uses, and of course near water supplies where people are pulling their water. Those likewise were most of the time wholly unnecessary, used sort of prophylactically, right? Like taking a big dose of antibiotics at the beginning of the year, just in case you might get sick in October. And most of the time they're not needed, but even when you would want to use an insecticide, there are a number of safer, effective alternatives. And so the Birds and Bees Protection Act would prohibit these two categories of uses. They account for 80 to 90% of all the neonics going into New York's environment every year. So it addressed the big part of the problem. And it would be, a relatively narrowly tailored bill to just these uses. Again, just sort of the dumb and replaceable uses, and have certain exemptions for invasive species, but it really would get at the heart of the problem. So, what happened to the bill? The bill passed the Assembly, which is good news, and it had actually passed the Senate the year before, but unfortunately didn't get a vote in the Senate last year. Close only counts in horseshoes. The bill needs to pass in both houses and get signed by the governor in order to become law. But we're hopeful that it will this year in a non-election year. So, and here's where I'll turn it over to Lena for the most important part, which is what folks can do.
Yeah, so thanks, Dan, for that great presentation. So yeah, how can folks get involved? We have quite a few different ways. First off, we have a couple of different coalition letters that we've been circulating. One is just a general letter of support that we're hoping to send in to leaders in a week or so. So we'd love more signatures on that. And we'll also be still collecting signatures for that afterwards. We'll probably send it again at some point. And that's for any farms or businesses or organizations that care about this issue, and that's pretty general. We also have a letter that we're getting breweries to sign on to as well. So if you have any connections in that area, we'd love to get more businesses on that letter. And we also have a health letter that we're getting medical professionals to sign on to as well. And all those letters we can make available for people to see the sign-on forms. And then one of the most important things is contacting your legislatures. So, calling, emailing, calls are most important. And we'd love to have people from, all over the state call in. We also have created a script for folks to use if they need, some more information on the bill while they're calling in. And then another great option is writing an op-ed or letter to the editor. We have a couple of people that are doing so, but we'd always love more, especially letters to the editors in your local paper. Huge help to get the word out there. Another way is lobby days, which we actually have our first lobby day coming up on January 24th. It's going to be a virtual lobby day. So hopefully that means more people can get involved. And we'll have more information about how to get involved in that coming up shortly. We're going to start planning that out. And then I'm sure we'll have more lobby days in the future as well, hopefully in person. So in Albany, if folks can make it up to Albany. And then other opportunities, just getting the word out there in various ways, thinking about different people or businesses or local leaders that might want to get involved. And also, sharing information on social media is a great way to do that as well. But yeah, I think those are most of the ways. Dan, I don't know if you have any other thoughts before questions.
Yeah, I think we can move to questions, and I'll stop sharing my my screen here.
And we have had a request, if you could pop into the chat right away, a link to that sign on, that would be helpful. People can click on it while we're
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing too. We will have a petition for individuals to sign on to soon. I believe we're still getting the site ready for that, but that'll be if you don't have like a business or a farm, that'll be a way to sign in as well. And I will find the letter sign on to share.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So questions. This was a great presentation. I feel like I'm sure I'm not alone that I kind of knew a tip of the iceberg, but I did not know the depth of this problem. So I really appreciate all that you shared with us. What are questions or reactions? Go ahead, Shabazz.
We, Josephine and I have a food waste compost facility here in the New Paltz area. And we compost maybe 30, 40 tons of food waste per week.
Oh, wow.
And we make a product from that. And we are very interested in what is in our end product, and would need to, we have a small budget for testing, and we're starting to work, put something together with a chemistry intern at the college. But and we don't have to answer this online here, but anything that we could do to put together a kind of a testing protocol for us, we would be very, very interested in that.
I would be interested in the results of that. Like, are the pesticides, so we know that certainly with certain produce, neonics are getting into food sources. So they're getting into fresh produce. They're even getting into baby food. There's some good testing on that. We don't have testing on all sorts of different foods, but whether the pesticides are persisting long enough that they're actually making it into compost, that would be really interesting. In terms of testing, the lab, so Cornell actually has led the way on a lot of this stuff. And I know that they have a lab that does testing, and I think they do some of the cheapest testing, but that's not to say that it is cheap. I think a test for a battery of neonics, like all 5, runs a couple $100, something like that. And I believe the lab, the person to contact would be Scott McArt. And so he's the person that did the Neonic study, and his email is online. I forget what it is offhand, but you can look up all the Cornell professors. And I know he said that that they had the cheapest testing for these pesticides, and that the lab would do testing for the public. This was a couple of years ago that he told me this. So I don't know if that information is current, but I would reach out to him and see if there is some way to get Cornell to do that testing.
Yeah,
Dan,
look
what
at
was
that
Scott's
name
last
again.
name?
Scott McArt, and Scott just spelled like Scott, and then McArt, MCART.
I got it. Thank you.
One of the questions that we have in the chat is from Holly. She says, the scope of the problem is truly terrifying. Agreed. Is there a list of nurseries or plant sources that do not use neonics?
So it's gonna depend. Most native plant nurseries are gonna not use neonics. Most organic production cannot use neonics, right? They're a synthetic pesticide. So by definition, if you're going to an organic nursery, those are not going to have neonics in those plants. Most other nurseries will use neonics in their production. The reason being that, nursery plants, people want those to look absolutely perfect. And so they don't want any plant damage, right? No nibbling at the leaves at all. And so even more so than in food production, there's a real push to use pesticides, and neonics are a preferred alternative. So
And adding to that, an answer to that question, Dorna shared that she talked to the greenhouse manager at Adams and they don't use neonics. Mark and Miriam, go ahead. You have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One, if we were to ban neonics tomorrow, how long would it be staying in the soil, or do we know that? That's one. The other question is, if we're using corn for biofuel, are we also spraying it into the atmosphere at some point?
Yeah, so I would say on the first point, the answer is we don't really know. Although it would take probably at least sort of in the 5 to 10 year range. So we know that the half-life of some of these pesticides in soil is somewhere in the neighborhood of several years. So as far as what we know, neonics do break down. They're not like DDT or PCBs. So they will eventually break down. Although I talked with a soil scientist once who said, well, we know that the parent compounds break down, but we don't know if all the compounds that they break into break down. And some of them are also toxic and even more toxic to people than the parent compound. But as far as we know, they do break down eventually, but it will take a number of years. And we're still finding neonics in Europe, even several years after the ban. So it's going to take a while. But the good news is that the best way to get out of a hole is to stop digging, and so that we know that if we do stop digging, that will help. In terms of biofuel production, that's actually a new question, so I don't know. But I would imagine that, through the combustion process, at some point, the neonic parent chemical at least would be destroyed. So neonics persist at different levels in different environments. And I think, exposed to air and light, they tend to break down quicker than they do in soil. So I would have to imagine that combustion may break them down, but I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Good question. Other questions, comments? I really appreciated all the suggestions that you provided, Lena, in terms of things to do, because I always find it very frustrating if I hear about a new problem and I don't know how to help the situation. So you gave us some really concrete things that we can do. Signing on to the link that you provided, participating in Lobby Day, writing an op-ed. I certainly noted on my calendar. It's good to know that the January 24th is a online opportunity so we don't have to drive in even our EVs up to Albany, but to be able to participate remotely is great. Tell me, either Lena or Dan, who's opposed to the current New York bill? I mean, who are the people, what can we do to address opposition that there might be?
So largely it is the chemical industry, but also the Farm Bureau as well. And they're a pretty powerful group. And it's sort of surprising because we see this as a pro-farmer bill. Really the only agricultural use that's affected are the corn and soybean seed treatments, so that a corn farmer could still use neonics in a different way. They just wouldn't be able to use the pre-treated seeds. And of course, there's all sorts of exceptions if the seed's not available or if it would cause undue economic hardship. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the problem is that the chemical companies, the folks producing the pesticides, are now the same people that are producing the seeds. And if you want to buy the corn seed that everyone wants to buy, you have to buy it with the meal plan, right? Which is, it comes with the pesticide already on the seed. And, I've heard farmers complain about it, that they are being forced to purchase a pesticide that they don't feel is necessary, but that's just part of the package, right? They don't actually have a choice. And we've seen any other market where there's been restrictions on the use of these pesticides, there's been no effect on production. And, a place like Canada, so for example, in Quebec, it wasn't a straight ban there. It was, you just had to go to your agronomist. And if your agronomist said you need to use neonic treated seed, then you could go ahead and use it. And so in 2015 in Quebec, about 100% of conventional corn was pre-treated with the neonic. We just got the numbers for 2020 after they instituted the rules. That number is now 0.2%.
Wow.
So people looked at it and they said, you know, we don't need these. And and that number is gone. I bet you in 2021, it'll go down even further. So, again, this is an input cost that farmers are not benefiting from. And also a number of New York farmers rely on bees and other pollinators, right? And they rely on beneficial insects, and they rely on soil health and soil microbes and soil decomposers. So, yeah, but those are the major interests. We think it's predominantly being driven by the chemical industry opposition.
And who are our allies? Who can we really, connect with to raise awareness here?
There are so many great allies. It's hard to even name them all. So I think, Lena could tell you how many groups we have, but I think it's over 150 on the letter. And these are groups that, run the gamut. So it's going to be all of the usual suspects in terms of the environmental group, us, Audubon Society, Sierra Club. It's also going to include health groups, Physicians for Social Responsibility, the Autism Science Foundation, et cetera, environmental justice groups, organic farmers, the, NOFA New York, the main group for organic farmers, is part of the coalition. We have a number of individual farms, businesses, beekeepers, breweries, chef. I feel like I'm forgetting groups, but it's a pretty broad and diverse coalition, because as you all have seen, this is an issue that affects just about everything. So yeah, there's a good group of, there's a lot of support, I think a lot of popular support, and I think that's why we've gotten as far as we have with this bill. And again, we think 2023, right after an election, this is a good year. This is a year we have some opportunity.
You mentioned that there were other states that have already passed similar legislation, Maine, and what was the other state?
Maine and New Jersey passed non-agricultural bans. New York would be the first state to deal with the seeds. And, the reason being, there's not a lot of corn and soybean in New Jersey or Maine, but there's a good amount in New York. So, and we know nationwide, if you look at where most of the neonic use is, it's on these seed treatments, again, that are not providing benefits for farmers. And, the good news is we have great research institutions in New York, like Cornell University, and they've led the research on this. And so, in a large part, it's that research and that science that gives us the opportunity to do something smart.
Excellent. Leola just put a message in the chat. Leola, would you like to speak to that direct?
Yeah, so any chance, I can't see myself, so I'm not sure if I'm in the screen right.
Yes, you're visible.
Okay. If you have any chance at all to advocate for regenerative agriculture in the 2023 Farm Bill, and you may know that our country's Farm Bill only comes around, I don't know, 5 years or however long it is, and an enormous amount goes to unsustainable agriculture. So regenerative agriculture would not use neonics and things like this. So it's really important that everybody possible could advocate for regenerative agriculture in the 2023 Farm Bill.
Yeah, we're definitely doing that as well. And I'm not as directly involved with that, but we're trying to protect, actually some good things and some of the regenerative ag programs in previous farm bills. The bad news is that, with the recent election, I think the opportunities for a very progressive farm bill have narrowed significantly. But of course, we're going to look for opportunities, and we'll definitely be working on that this year.
Excellent. Thank you for informing us about that, Leola. I had a question regarding the sign-on letter. It might, just to clarify, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. It can be both either an individual or an individual representing a group, correct?
So for the sign-on letter, we're mostly looking for businesses, farms, organizations. We have had some individuals sign on, and we're mostly using, putting them on a separate list and using that list to do more outreach and send the petition to in the future as well. Because the petition will be mostly for individuals to sign on to. So if folks did want to put their names on this letter individually, we'll just make sure they won't be on the letter, but we'll make sure they're kept on a list to be informed about the petition and future opportunities as well.
Perfect. Well, some of us on this meetup are part of the Climate Action Coalition in New Paltz, so we can ask, do an organizational ask to see if we can sign on as an organization. And then also a number of us are on the Climate Smart Task Force, so we can formally ask the task force, permission to sign on. So at least you'll get another couple of organizations. And I would really like to respond to the call to action and wonder if there's anybody in the group tonight that thinks that they could write an op-ed to Hudson Valley One. I think that would be a really good follow-up. Any volunteers offhand? And likewise, I'd like to have a paragraph or two in the next newsletter. The monthly newsletter comes out at the beginning of each month, and we always have the details about the new meetup and everything, but sometimes we do follow-up from what we learned at the last one. So I think this would be a really good topic to cover in the newsletter. If someone would like to do a write-up about that, that would be awesome.
I'd be willing to help write it.
Oh, excellent.
But I don't want to be the lone author. I don't know. I don't feel like know enough about it yet.
Well, what will help us, Dorna, is we have this recording, so I can share out the recording with all of you, and that way we can catch some of those, really detailed slides that had, really good facts in there. Dan or Arlene, is it possible to share out that slide deck with us so that we can use some of that information?
I think I might need to take out some of the pictures, but we can do that, and hopefully the file size is not too large. Maybe if I take out a few of the pictures, that'll help. One other point on the LTE, we have an LTE guide with, for folks who've never written a letter to the editor. That's that's what an LTE is, or an op-ed. We can share that guide with folks. It has sort of the how-to and also some talking points too. So I probably will get it to you maybe tomorrow or Thursday, but Janelle, I can share that with you and when I share the PowerPoint.
Great. And I see in the chat, Joel Salas has stepped up to write the LTE. So that's awesome. Thank you. And Rose Renitsky, who is on the call here, she would also like to help with the letter. She says she's written. Rose, did you want to speak at all? You've done so much in the area of saving our bees.
Yes, I'm sorry I got on late because I didn't know about the delay. But yes, I'm on the board of the Ulster County Beekeepers Association, and I would at the next meeting try to propose that we sign on to the letter as an organization. But I've done this work for a long time. I am a beekeeper. I am enrolled in the Master Beekeeper course at the Dice Lab at Cornell. Oh. And so I'm just starting, and I'll have a lot more information during future meetings. This is a critical time. And it's a convergence of several things on our honeybees, which are not native to this continent. But they are involved in 33% of all the food we eat. So if we lose them, we will have great shortages, and our lives will be very changed. The honeybee right now is being assailed by pesticides. pathogens, climate change, loss of habitat, and predators. We have Varroa destructor, which came from India, and is really rampant in our hives right now. Something I've been dealing with for the past 3 days is my bees are coming out thinking that it's spring. They should be in cluster in the hive, trying to stay warm for the winter and eating their honey. So I've been feeding them honey. I have my bee restaurant out in my backyard with honeycomb in it, and they come out and they alight on the honeycomb and eat the honey that I give them, because they don't understand why there is nothing in bloom. Neonics do affect their brains. It affects their GPS. They rely very much on the ability to perceive the magnetic waves of Earth for their navigation. And when their brains are hurt, harmed by neonics, they can't do that anymore. And this is where we have colony collapse. They can't find their hive. They can't find forage. So it's a convergence of many things. I hope that we can do something and it's not too late, because it might be. I think this year we're going to see a loss of at least 80% of the bees in the state. And so, I hope I'm wrong, but I've already lost 2 out of 3 hives just this season alone. So I look forward to, more participation in the future now that we're all getting back together again and working together. I think maybe we can make a difference. And yesterday, the band that I play in, and Jill plays in it too, but she wasn't there because she's away. We played for the swearing in of Jen Metzger as the Ulster County executive, and Jen has done a great deal at the state level to support this stuff. So I know locally we have great support from Jen. So I'm hoping for some positive stuff happening this year. And thanks, Janelle, for asking me to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, and Rose, I don't know, you mentioned varroa mites, and I don't know if you know the studies linking. It's not just the navigation, right? It's the neonics affect bees' immune systems and their ability to fight off varroa mites. So there's good studies now linking the problems we're seeing with varroa mite with neonic contamination. It's not, ultimately the varroa are what's killing them, but they wouldn't succumb if they weren't weakened first by the pesticides.
That's absolutely right. And the varroa spreads viruses. It goes from, and so it goes between hives and everything. So if you have one hive with varroa, you're going to have all of them. Right now, several of us in the area are experimenting because we keep trying to come up with something with giving them probiotics and prebiotics. There is a company that makes those like a yogurt, a powdered yogurt for bees. And they say give it to them every 2 weeks. Well, we're giving it to them every week, even in the wintertime, so that we hope that strengthens their immune systems enough that they can fight off this terrible destructive mite. Hive beetles are another problem. But another problem is coming from Australia. I went to the Eastern Apicultural Society in August, and they said something is looming from there that is worse than the varroa mite. Well, if that gets here, we're really in trouble. So let's keep a positive attitude and hope we can ward off all this stuff. Thanks, though.
Yes, thank you for the additional information. This time of year, we get a lot of seed catalogs in the mail, those of us who are gardeners. When we're looking at a seed catalog or in a store buying a packet of seeds, how do we know that there are no neonics on those seeds?
So, the good news is for folks that are buying seeds, you're going to know if there's a neonic on that seed. So the first indication is going to be that the seed is colorized. So any pesticide treatment on a seed by law is required to be colorized to let folks know, hey, there's a pesticide on the seed. So it'll be fairly obvious. And as you saw in those pictures earlier, sometimes the coatings are even more aggressive and they look sort of like Skittles. but they won't look natural. And also there should be, although I know there's been lax enforcement on this, but there should be a label on that seed bag indicating that the seeds have been treated and saying what they've been treated with. EPA is sort of tightening up the screws on that because I think that's been a little lax, but at the very least, right, they'd be colorized and there should be a label on it. Probably unless you're a conventional farmer, you're not going to see neonic treated seeds. But if you do see a seed that is an odd color, that's an indication that it may be treated with a pesticide.
Sometimes little tiny fine seeds are coated with like a clay or I don't know, some kind of substrate. So they're kind of a little round ball. They're easier to see. And those are colored. They don't look normal. Do you know what I mean? Is it possible that some of those are not treated with neonic, but they simply are just coated to be larger to see for planting?
Yeah, I think I've seen those balls. I think likely they're not going to be neonic treated, and most stuff for your home garden probably is not going to be neonic treated. And most of the time, although what I will say is, both for plants that you buy in the store and even for treated seeds, that where you get a lot of neonics all at once is with soil treatments. So I would be aware of garden products that say, 3-in-1 fertilizes and kills insects. And a lot of these combo products, they love to sneak neonics in fertilizers and in big amounts. So, when you're buying garden products, look at that label. Unfortunately, there's 5 different neonics and they all have, funny long names. So you have to know what you're looking for, but do read that label. Any product that has a pesticide in it should indicate at least what that chemical is. Ideally you shouldn't be using any pesticides on your home garden.
Yeah, thank you for that heads up. I want to just tell people real quick here before we go tonight. I really appreciate everybody hanging in there and coming back to our second link that you had to search for in your inbox. So grateful that you're all here and that we have this recorded so I can share it out with others who couldn't be here. Our next meetup, it's always the first Tuesday of the month, is February 7th. And they're always start at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And the topic next month is on battery energy storage and what towns and villages can do to promote the development of large-scale battery energy storage. And also a lot of just things about batteries in general that you may not have thought about before. Like, for example, many of us have now battery or electric lawnmowers or power tools. And there's things to know just about those batteries in terms of, getting the longest charging cycle out of them, why they're a good alternative to gas-powered power tools, etc., and how to properly dispose of those batteries at end of life. So be watching for that next month. And then we also, I mentioned before, we have our monthly Climate Smart Book Club, which is always the third Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock. And this month we're reading the book Dark Money. And all of these dates and details are on our monthly newsletter that just went out. So that should have been in your inbox. Are there any last thoughts tonight, questions about our New Paltz Climate Smart in general or to our presenters tonight? Okay, well, I really appreciate Dan and Lena. Thank you very much. You definitely provided us with just a wealth of information, and I love that we have a punch list of what we need to do and follow up. So much appreciated, and I will connect with those of you who volunteered to help with some of that writing and that follow up. So I think that will really, it gives us hope when we are taking action and addressing these problems. So much appreciated. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you
Take
very
care
much.
all.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
you.
Thanks so much for having us. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
Too.
Thank you.
Thank you.